The Lester's Grill, Carolina Hotel. Jim's lunch for hot dogs, we'll eat our fill. Sam and Max shoe shine, I'll pick up the bill. California sandwich shop, we'll find our thrill. Down on Hamburger Square, Hamburger Square. Some of my favorite people down there. Down on Hamburger Square, Hamburger Square. Sam and Max and little Lester's down there. Got something can't be taken away. Power of love, baby, what I say. Max Corner Grill got the mystery mounds. It's Blumenthal's and you know you're downtown. Down on Hamburger Square, Hamburger Square. Some of my favorite people down there. Down on Hamburger Square, Hamburger Square. Sam and Max and little Esther's down there.
Hello and welcome. With me today, my guest, our conversation is Miss Jasmine Beard. She is involved with A Joy Consulting. She's a keynote speaker, a motivational speaker, TEDx, multilingual specialist. How many things am I feel like I'm missing a whole bunch of things, but we'll start there with all this. So what am I missing? JCs, right?
Yes.
Involved with the JCs?
Yeah, so I like to say, first and foremost, I like to say human, because sometimes we forget with all the things that we do, we forget that we're human first, and that's to be honored. And then from there, I like to say community facilitator, in the sense of, connecting people in various aspects, from business, civic engagement, nonprofit, for-profit, community in general.
Tell me about how you got involved with the nonprofit world. Like, what drove you to you now?
There's a lot of things that drove me to me now. But as far as, specifically into nonprofit, I've always had a heart of service, and I have my mom and grandmother to thank for that. I mean, even my dad and, all the family influences, I would say, but definitely my mother and grandmother. I remember as a young child, they were always doing some act of service, and it wasn't always necessarily in an organization or in a group setting. They often took it upon themselves to, support people in need. My mom always dreamed of having a soup kitchen and a shelter for women who experience domestic violence. So she didn't get to do that per se at the magnitude that her heart desired, but she definitely did a lot of work of making sure that she empowered people by letting them know what their rights were. When it came to if someone was being evicted, or my mom was very, very resourceful. Like they would call, let's go to, if you need support, go to Miss Beard or go to Miss B. That's what they called her, Miss B
Miss
or
B.
Queen B. But I would say just watching her do that, and then, us modeling after her, feeding people who were experiencing homelessness as children. And, I just knew, like, there's got to be more to life, even throughout school, volunteering in the community, after school, on the weekends, and performing in the arts, growing up in this building, the Cultural Arts Center, since a young girl, from arts to dance.
I know we can get into the dance. What did you get involved with
Here?
in this building?
So when I was about, I'd say 9, 10 years old, they had the African American Art Atelier had art camps in the summer. And I participated in those quite frequently, my brother and I. And they had a contest for whoever did the piece, and whoever had the most reflective piece, I would say. The theme was people. And so my piece was, to the naked eye, seemed simple, but all the colors were blended, and then I had dots of each individual color that was, just that stood out. And the reflection upon that was that, despite our individuality, as a greater whole, we're all the same. And so we still have needs. We're all human. We have very similar needs, and we all want to be seen, felt, and loved. And at 9 years old, I was just that deep. So I won the contest, and my art was displayed in the African American Art Atelier. And also, grew up in African dance, and so I took some classes here. We would practice here or at Cal Clue Center, various places in the community, Warnersville Recreation Center. So I spent a lot of time in this building growing up, and then sometimes we would do little small theater, mini drama or theater camps as well.
I remember all the things they've done at the Atelier. Like they had a runway. They had like a fashion runway, and I couldn't believe they built that like in the back. They had like it was a whole fashion thing, and I think some folks from A&T had put that on. They had a painting like exhibit, and I couldn't remember what the name of it was, but that was really cool because you got to watch somebody, a very talented artist. So actually, it was a couple different artists paint from start to finish, and so that was really cool. They've done a bunch of stuff. This building is like, it's amazing what they've done here.
Yes. Lots of talent has come through here.
Yeah. Tell me about. We'll jump right into dance. Tell me about dancing for you and what that was like.
My mom would say I learned how to dance before I knew how to walk. Ever since a young girl, I loved music. My mom used to host a lot of dinner parties and gatherings in the neighborhood. So I would always dance until it was time for me to go to bed. And then sometimes I would just sneak on the stairs and dance. But when I got into elementary school, I started taking ballet at Jones Elementary. I was taking ballet there. And then by the time I got into 4th grade, that's when they started offering African dance. I was 9 years young, and we had African dance after school, and we fell in love with it, which the instructor at the time, Miss Tianja Bean, she was in, she had a heart for the students in the community, and she took that once school ended and started a company called Rafiki African Dance Company, and we performed quite frequently, built some great work ethic as professional artists and dancers. Even in the summer, we were practicing 2 to 3 times a day. And I would say that's where I got my start in actual professional dancing as a young girl. And we built a relationship, such a deep relationship that pretty much we've adopted each other as mother and daughter. So she became a godmother for me. In every sense of the word. So we still keep in contact to this day, although she's back home in Bermuda now. So, yeah.
Why is that so important to have like arts and people like that to influence young folks in this community?
Because arts is a creative, it's a creative outlet, but it's also another love language. One of the things I remember when studying at UNCG, I studied Islam. And a few other belief systems and religions, but Islam, one of Muhammad's wife was Aisha. And I, making connections, that's one of my middle names. And it was interesting how Aisha honored Allah, God, through arts and dance. So each wife that Muhammad had represented represented a way to honor Allah, and Aisha's was through love, was through dance and the arts. And so I thought that was very interesting, and I basically, I fell in love with her as his youngest wife, and I think she was one of his favorites, if I remember correctly. But it's very important because, everyone has a different strength. They have a different way of communicating and expressing themselves through the world. Some people do it through music, some people do it through writing, some people do it through words, some do it through creating something, whether it's, digital design or whether it's through, engineering or gathering people. So the artistic outlet, and it's very therapeutic. Very therapeutic, is sometimes being able to express things that can't always be put into words. And that's so important, especially when you're young, when, children who don't have the words for what they're experiencing, whether it's positive or negative. But if they can create something visual, that's a way to externalize a feeling, whether it be something good or not so good. So I think that's very important. And thinking from a wellness perspective, things that we hold within the body, especially if it's not good for us, that turns into poison and manifests itself in all kinds of different health ailments.
Yeah, I've seen that happen to someone that I know, someone that I love. It just, you can see especially someone that like is I don't want to say a people pleaser, but someone that's just so, they don't fight back. You know what I mean? They don't push back. There's no resistance, and they just. I think that energy, as you were saying, that has to go somewhere.
It does.
And I'm a strong believer that manifests itself into just. It's either bad eating habits or bad drinking habits, or even if not that, just it internalizes itself to like cancer or something like
Absolutely.
that. I hate that, but like I think that is a real truth.
Absolutely. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, right? It has to go somewhere. We have to transform it and transition it into something. And being able to do that, and not everybody understands that. Some people do it innately. Some people have a person that shows them how to transform that energy, even if they don't know how to verbalize. But and what we call outlets, and that's literally what it is. Putting that energy into something else, even if you're not sure what it represents at that time, but being able to express it. Yeah,
this is why I think like creativity, like I will say, like dancing, like I'm sure like you had a dance that you practiced over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
And then like eventually like you mastered it, and like I'm sure that feeling was just like immense when you either performed it or like your teacher was just like, that's it, you got it.
Absolutely.
Some tricky steps or something, you're just like, I will you're thinking probably in the back of your head, I will never get this is crazy. And then you finally get it, and that feeling is just immense.
Absolutely. And a lot of the dance that I've learned was just by doing. Just by doing. I've taken some instructional dance throughout the years, but sometimes just getting out there and doing it. And I think that's, that's, as they say, art imitating life, but art as a part of life, right? Sometimes you just learn things just by having the experience of doing it, and you get better. Some of us, and I can find myself in that trap too, you want to learn all you can, read all the books and study everybody, but it's like you really don't know what it feels like until you've actually done it. And there are some line dances that I do from time to time, and people are like, how did you know that? I didn't. I just got out there and did it. And repeating it enough times, because line dancing is very repetitive, there are some that are very tough. When I'm on the dance floor doing it, it feels good. Now when I stop, I couldn't teach you or tell you how that dance went. But when I'm in the moment, I'm not thinking, I'm just doing.
Yeah, sometimes it just happens naturally. Where like sometimes it works where like you just don't think about it.
Yeah.
You don't think about it, because sometimes that thinking you can really blind yourself.
Yeah. Staying present.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a panel that I was on just this past Saturday for ACE Spirit Week, or Collective of Excellence, we were talking about love, leading with love, and one of the things they talked about was how to lead the people that you're with love, but also when you have a vision, whether it's entrepreneurship or a vision for the people that you're leading, how do you stay motivated? And one of the ways that I shared was being in the moment, staying present. Because staying present with yourself as the leader, making sure that you're aware of what you're experiencing, how you're showing up to empower your team, but also staying present with your team or the group that you're leading, to make sure you're facilitating and in tune with what they need as well, in order to fully show up as themselves, but also to empower them to continue executing and delivering on that vision for the collective.
Now you're involved, this is part of your consulting?
For the
A Joy?
A Joy, which one, as
A
far
Joy.
as a spirit of excellence, or a collective of the ACE Week?
The ACE Week and all, the ACE Week, yeah.
That was more of a community member. I was
Okay.
just, Jordan Lee was aware of all the things that I'm involved in, and he's also a fellow JC member, and he asked if I would be on the panel based on his knowledge of my leadership in the work that I do in the community.
Okay. So tell me a little more about consulting and what you're doing with Ajoy.
Okay, with Ajoy Consulting, one of the reasons, well, I would say I started it as a transition out of corporate America, and I've always been interested in interactions with people. The name came from me having the reputation of being a joy to work with, and it was a joy doing what I do, helping people achieve beyond their perceived limitations. And as a person who enjoys coaching, mentoring, and things of that sort, and just love being creative, I knew I wanted to keep that same energy in the company. And also, my daughter's name is Anya Joy, and my mom's middle name is Joy. And so as I transitioned out of corporate, one of the things I wanted to make sure was to keep the self-awareness piece alive, not just for myself as a continuous learning and development, but for other leaders and other people who are interacting or guiding and leading people on a day-to-day basis. And so, when someone asks what we do, we help C-suite leaders leverage self-awareness to empower their teams, to grow the organization and the business so that they can continue leading the business versus managing the business. And so that's pretty much what we do. And then we started a cohort at the end of last year, which was called Ayúdame Cohort, and that's Spanish for help me. The reason I started learning Spanish as a young child beyond elementary school was because I wanted to help people, and in particular the Latin American families that first started to immigrate or migrate into our neighborhoods that I was living in Greensboro, and wanted to play with the children. And we had limited dialogue. Smiles and waves were frequent, and kick a couple of balls here and there, but as you can imagine, not much dialogue, a lot of silence and laughter here and there. And just seeing people being mistreated in the banks, the stores, at the gas station, I didn't like it. And seeing adults crying, that was heartbreaking for me. If I could see, my mom saw, they gave them a $100 bill, but then the cashier or clerk would only give them back, $20, and they only asked for $20 in gas, and then the colleague actually joining in to say that, no, you only gave us $20 or you only gave us $40. And I'm like, as a child, I knew that was not right. It was, not operating with integrity.
Ooh. And see, and that's a practice, because I've caught people before doing this myself, and it's especially difficult, with the language barrier, but I've caught people that have given me the wrong change, and whether it's intentional or not intentional, I'm like, no, you're supposed to, if you have a big bill, you leave it on the counter or on the register. That way, this is the way I was trained as a cashier, is you give them, so that way there's no dispute between the two of us how much you got back. So if I messed up, let's say I'm the cashier, if I messed up, you just be like, no, that's oh shoot, my bad. That's supposed to be a common practice.
That self-awareness piece as a leader is, goes back to how are you training your people, and to your point, I didn't like that, and I used to tell my mom, I'm going to help those people when I get older. So continued learning inside of school with Spanish, and then doing a lot of self-study outside of school or independent study. So by the time I was 16, I was fluent in Spanish.
And so you talked about, I want to get into the language portion of this,
Okay.
But you talked about leading versus managing. Can you tell me about the difference between those two?
So yes, let's give an example. Have you ever planned an event, or let's say you planning a project, right? Managing, when you're managing something, you're in the weeds in the day-to-day. You're doing, and following up is one thing, but you're finding yourself doing a little bit more in the details than you should be doing. Leading is setting the vision, making sure you have the resources, or empowering your people to receive those resources. You set the vision, you're guiding them, but also at the same, or facilitating what they need. And then letting them decide, what does this look like based on their respective responsibilities. So I would say, for TEDx Greensboro, if I'm leading the team, then we set collectively the theme, but it's being a facilitator of what the information, what the overall goal and objectives are. We're we set the vision. We know what we want this to look like. I'll share with them how I want the attendees and the guests to feel or the community to experience this event, and then the team will contribute to how they're going to delegate and deliver on this experience in their respective areas. They decide what resources they're going to use. They tell me what they need, what's missing, and then that's my job to lead and make sure they have those things and protect them and make sure that it's just as much as a favorable experience for them as well. And so it's more so leading is kind of, and I would say following or facilitating, because they're telling me what they need. I'm guiding, but I'm not in the day-to-day where I'm making the phone calls and doing all the things. So I like to, when you say that, some of the leaders I work with, they'll say, I'm doing too much of my employees' work. I can't lead the business, or I can't lead the organization because I'm too busy doing this or in the operations, pretty much, versus seeing the overarching vision and picture for the organization and the group, and being able to say, this is what the overall experience should look like, having that time to reflect, and then check back in to see if what the team is doing is in alignment with where the vision is going.
Yeah, so they set like kind of the guiding principle, and then the leader or the leader should set the guiding principle, and then their folks underneath them per se, the leader should be helping them.
Absolutely. Yep.
And a lot of people, the old school way of, managing is like, I tell you what to do and you do it, and that's just how this goes. And now there's sort of a new, probably within like the last 10, 15 years or so, there's sort of a rejuvenance of this idea of leadership. And it's like as a boss or as a leader, you're supposed to be empowering your people to, like you said it best, what do you need to be able to do your job better?
That's it.
And how can I get you there?
Absolutely.
You still need to do your job, but like, how can I get you there? And how can we create an environment where, you want to come to work?
Absolutely.
And you want to be able to do your job.
Yes.
And not just, man, it's 8 o'clock, I gotta go to work. Shoot,
Yeah.
You don't want that.
That's like a slow death.
Yeah, slow death. Oh, man.
Because literally it's a slow spiritual death, because it's time you don't get back. You're riding the clock. A lot of times people are miserable. And when you said an environment to where you want to come to work every day. So let's start back, putting my project management hat on, root cause analysis. Do you have the right person in the right role to begin with?
Do they even want to do this job?
Right, and are they skilled? Are they behaviorally equipped? Are they from their natural behavioral style? Are they the right person to do this role? Because if you don't have the right people doing the right things at the right time, you're not going to get the right results for the overall objective. Right. And then bringing it back to the leader and accountability, am I the right leader for this role? And that's, that could be subjective, because things can be taught, but based on my behavioral strengths, let's say, okay, if that's the case, yes. However, I'm not good at or great at all things, right? So now, self-awareness as a leader, where are my caution areas? Where are my developmental opportunities? I'm gonna yield and lean into my strengths, because I'm human. I'm gonna lean into where I operate and thrive the most: strategy, vision, guidance, and then the people that are more skilled and detailed at process optimization, that are good with compliance. They love the details. Accountants, financial, legal, those things. Those are the places where I don't like to play. I know enough to be dangerous, but those are the places that, again, I know where my lane boundaries are, and so I need to be aware of that. Instead of, some leaders would say, I can do it all and let me do it. No, you're an expert in this field. what do you need for me to make sure that you're thriving? Because naturally your behaviors are geared towards that. You like routine, you like repetitiveness. Let me make sure that you are in a role that allows you to do that, but also see you enough as a person that's on the team, see you enough to know areas in which you can grow. Because if I'm an effective leader, from day one, I'm already pipelining, right? Mm-hmm. So as I'm pipelining and preparing for succession, I'm also wanting to see where can they grow. If they are in the details, they are a great high performer, but then they have, they're pretty good with people interactions. They can stretch a little bit. How am I doing that? How am I putting them in scenarios in which they can stretch some? And that's for anyone that's on the team, just in case something happens to me, or if I'm having to transition out, I go elsewhere, who am I developing next? And to me, that's real leadership, constantly developing the people around you, whether personal or professional,
right. Because one way or another, I think a leader is going to go.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
One way or another.
Yes.
This might be your day. You might get hit by a bus, or, and I mean that's cynical, but what it is what it is. Or you might retire. Your family might just decide, like,
or relocate.
Wife, husband kids might just might decide that day, like, you know what, I got to cut back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you understand that. You're
Absolutely.
a parent,
Yes.
You understand about cutting back. I understand. I got a kid myself now. So, so you have to find that balance.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, you one way or another, you're gonna leave that position.
Yeah.
Either you're gonna go somewhere else. You're gonna leave. So yeah, empowering your people. That's a very military thing too. What happens if, the first guy? Okay, the next person needs to be able to step up and handle that position.
Yeah.
That's like the key role of one of the officers' position is to be able to take the people under them and move them up.
Yeah. and not just one person either.
Right. Yeah.
Because some people think of pipelining as this person is promising. Yeah, but again, what if something happens to them? What if they get ill, or what if they have to relocate? A new opportunity came, or what if they want to go back to school and so they don't have the capacity? In one of my organizations, someone who I feel is prime for the next role of leadership in our organization. Would love to have her there. However, I love the fact that her leadership, she was transparent and said, I would love to, and I'm honored, but I have to honor my capacity. She has a new child, and we honor that and respect that, So, and she has a family, she has a full-time job, she's on other organizations, and that's what a leader does as well. Understand when enough is enough and know their boundaries. And it's like, that's all the more why she's primed for it. But however, as a leader, we have to respect her boundaries and honoring that. Doesn't mean never, it just means not right now. And that's for any opportunity. No doesn't mean never, it just means not right now, especially if it's meant for you. So what does that mean? Who else in the organization, right? So that's one of the things that I'm big on is anybody can be a leader at any given moment. Is how are you developing them? And again, from managing to leading, when you've been able to lead well if you can step away and there's not a bunch of fires when you come back because you've properly prepared and empowered and facilitated what your team needs. Doesn't mean things won't happen. Some things that is just the way it is. But when you've properly prepared and didn't gatekeep from your team, they have what they need to be able to solve the problems and address it without you.
Yeah, and that's where ego can be a real problem child. This is mine, and it's coming with me, and I don't want anyone else to, take it. But,
and that same person will complain that they're doing all the work, and it's like, okay, do you want to put the mirror in front of you for a second? Why are you doing all the work? Is it because you don't trust your team? Is it because of unaddressed trauma from childhood or throughout life?
That's a whole other hour that we can get into.
And that's the thing that people sometimes forget, again, just because they're in that leadership role doesn't mean that they didn't have some things that they endured. And sometimes they get to where they are because they put so much pressure on themselves because potentially they could be running from something that reminds them of a traumatic experience. And wanting to not repeat that. So this, transforming that energy into their work and their career to where that has become their identity, outside of work, who are you? And then on top of that, you're not seeing how that trauma has impacted not just yourself, but the people around you. If something happened where you couldn't rely on the people that were supposed to take care of you as a child, then that means you become hyper independent. And then you're like, no, I'll get it, or I'm not going to ask for help. So then you suffer more. And then you get sick because you don't feel safe enough to be vulnerable to ask for help from those that are around you, and they want to, but if you've not ever been able to comfortably ask for it and receive it consistently, you're afraid. Or if you've been vulnerable and it's been abused.
Oh yeah, and that's having that, ability to always take things on.
Yeah.
Right? You've always just been that person, and so people, you sort of take on that persona, and people see that in you. So especially leaders or bosses, whatever, they keep, it's like, okay, he or she can handle it, they can handle it, they can handle it, and they keep piling stuff on you, and you got to be human enough. That was what you said when you started, and I love that. Human. You have to admit when you're just human, you're like, okay, I have taken on, we need to, hey, look, we got to spread this out a little bit because this is too much. I can only do so much.
Yeah.
The other thing about it is, I think you addressed it, and I've heard this before, was not everybody wants to, move up.
Yeah.
They might be capable, but they're like, look, I just want to come in and do my whatever it is, IT work.
Yeah. Yes.
I just want to do my IT work.
Yes.
I'm good where I'm at. I'm happy. I don't have all this, I'm not going to bring all this extra home, to my family, because that's, whether or not, people, I leave it at the door or whatever. I think some people are better at it than others.
Yeah.
But I think in one way or another that it piles up on you.
Yeah, especially when you care, right? And you don't have an outlet, to transform that, right? And when you care and you don't have an outlet, one of the leaders I spoke with when I was in corporate, he used gardening as his outlet, spending time with his daughters and gardening. And that's very, very therapeutic. During 2020, we were gardening a lot, and there were a lot of lessons in that garden when you're thinking, I always thought about, how you put seeds in the ground, and how deep do they have to go in the dirt, right? And then how that manifests in our own life. When you're going through a journey and you're taking on or pursuing a great goal, it's going to have great challenges, and sometimes you have to go in that dark period, that reflection, to reflect, to hear your own voices and thoughts, right? Check in with yourself, and so you need that alone time, that incubation period, to really, get, as some people say, the downloads and to get clarity on what the next steps are. And that doesn't always require, as some people, I like to say, a conference call. When it's your calling, it's not a conference call all the time, and it rarely is. And yes, we can get affirmation or confirmation in the outside world, but the answers really lie within the source.
And the other good thing about that is there's a lot of health benefits to that. Number one, you're forcing yourself to get out of the office or the house or whatever it is. In the garden, you're going to be away from technology and all the other nonsense that's going to consume you and consume your time. Get away from these screens that have been shown that is just depressing.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot of studies on this now about the depression that comes with that, just doom scrolling, they call it.
Yeah.
You're getting out, you're breathing some fresh air. You're getting out in the sunlight, which, that's nutrient. That's literally nutrients for your body.
The dirt.
Yeah, the dirt. Oh, grounded.
Grounding, but also the dirt, the minerals in the dirt that gets in our nails and our feet and permeate through our skin. I read an article many years ago that talked about, a lot of us were much happier as kids. We made mud pies. Our hands were wet. The dirt, the selenium and the magnesium was getting into our hands, especially if it was good quality soil, was getting into our body through the mud we were playing with, And some people ate them, but being curious.
Well,
But at
you
the end
know.
of the day, just playing in the dirt was very therapeutic and helpful because, to your point, those minerals that we don't often always get from our food sources, we were getting it in another way. And then the different sensations that you feel, that's activating different sensors of the brain, from the textures, the wetness, and warmth if it's in the summer, warm mud pies and things of that sort, and your motor skills of being able to form, so it's a lot of things that are going on in the dirt play.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's amazing watching a young person grow and figure these things out that have been, some things have been ingrained in your adult brain for some time, right? But they're like, they have to figure it out. And they're like, there's things I never thought of that I'm watching, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting, because he'll hit things, or he'll smack things, or he'll play with things, and that's just fun to watch. Yeah, that was one thing we taught you: get out, being able to get out and play, as an adult or as a kid.
Yes, we have to keep that. I was doing a presentation for the Art of Mass Gatherings in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 2021. It was during the folk festival downtown, and we did a pre-event gathering. And one of the things that I talked about that was most important for people to keep as throughout life is their imagination and their empathy. Your imagination allows you to continuously dream and activate your curiosity that we have as a child, because a lot of times life can take that away from you, the ability to dream and imagine things, because once it comes into the mind, it's alive. It's just up to you to, follow suit from the universe to bring that into tangible reality. And that's, again, that strategic part that excites me, is bringing idea from myself or the people that I'm around into a tangible reality. But then also the empathy, because now this idea is here. Who is it going to impact? Who is it going to help? Who could it potentially hurt? Who's going to benefit from that? And how does it make them better, from an individual to a group, your loved ones, and the community and society as a whole? So, some people imagine things and they might think it's cool, but not realizing, this is probably not so good for humanity, right? When we talk about technology and all the things, radiation, and, EPA exists partially for in part for that reason. It's like, this might be cool to do, but how is it impacting humanity and nature overall? So it's great to imagine, but it's also good to balance that with empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of those that are going to be impacted by what you are creating and bringing into the world.
That's amazing. We talked about health, and I remember in our conversation when I had met you, we talked about getting outside, talked about playing outside, being in the dirt. Diet is such a crucial part of our universe, and it's the American diet today is just it's very lacking. I mean, just stuff in the food that you just cannot pronounce.
That's the perfect way to put it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm like, you don't even know what you're eating anymore.
Yeah.
So we talked about. So you are a vegan now?
I like to say I say flexitarian.
Flexitarian.
Yeah,
Okay.
eat what I want when I want, depending on who's cooking it. And so, but typically my diet consists of primarily plant-based, and then I'll eat fish here and there. Halal lamb, maybe once or twice a year, if that. But I haven't had it in so long, so it's usually maybe 1 or 2 bites. I'll have a craving for it, but primarily pescatarian and plant-based.
Mm-hmm. And how did this come about? How did you discover that this was the path you wanted to go on?
As a child, I always gravitated towards healthy eating, loved fruits and vegetables all the time. I didn't really care for a lot of candy, so when I did have sugar or sweets, it was something specific that I wanted. Mm-hmm. So for my mom, she loved dark chocolate. I loved dark chocolate, well, because of her, the way she just romanticized and talked about dark chocolate, right? She used to make persimmon pudding. That was one of my favorites. And then, it was very particular things that I wanted if I craved sugar. As far as the meat, you know, again, as a child, I think I was just innately spiritual and just had this natural attunement and affinity towards nature. And so I would think about the animals, that empathy, right? How they would be harmed when we would eat them and things of that sort. And, you know, so yeah, I still ate eggs. If I ate meat, it was a specific meat. Like I loved when my mom made cast iron fried chicken. I would eat that, Salisbury steak, beef tips and rice. But a lot of the other meats I would give to my brothers. And pork, you know, pork chops were okay, but I didn't like a lot of salt as a child. You know, a southern delicacy, chitlins. Didn't really care for that. I only had it one time, and that was the last time. And I think I was 10. And so I just started realizing, you know, my brother, he's an avid reader as well, my older brother, and he often sought out a lot of knowledge. He began studying the Nation of Islam and the Five Percenter school of thought. And so I would, as a curious child, I would always, you know, what are you reading? What are you looking into? And he stopped eating pork, so I followed suit. And I started to understand why, and then thinking about, you know, the history of how and the role that pork played during times of enslavement, you know, for previous generations of Black people in this country, and so I was like, yeah, I'm not eating pork anymore, and then thinking about the health implications that a lot of people suffered, you know, from eating it, and it was just a natural progression. So at 10, stopped eating pork. I would just eat the vegetables that my grandmother would cook. And then at 16, I stopped eating beef. And I also had, you know, the godmother that I had from African dance at 9, she was vegan. You know, she was primarily vegetarian and vegan. And she transitioned, as I got older, into a raw vegan diet. And so just watching her and how beautifully she aged and how healthy she was or is, you know, that was another influence on me as well. And I know I loved cooking, and, you know, I come from a family that loves cooking from scratch, homemade and things. So I started to see, how can I do a healthier version of this? You know, this was before all the vegan alternatives were out. And even those you still have to be cautious of, you know, and that conversation is coming up now more frequently. But, you know, when it first came out, oh, this is all great. But processed food is processed food, right? So yeah, at 16, cut out beef. Chicken, I cut out off and on throughout college, you know, and then after I had my daughter, I really began to notice, because I always knew, and, you know, we talked about with my godmother that food that you eat should be energizing and nourishing, not just fulfilling, you know, eating to live, not just eating to satisfy. And so that was one of the things that I became more focused on, especially during my pregnancy. You know, I'm curating a human life, so I have to be mindful of what I put into my body, because whatever I put into my body goes into her body and her development, her cells and things of that sort. And so I was very intentional about the things that I ate. And once I gave birth, I also noticed certain foods that I ate, how it would drain me. I would feel sedated. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this does not feel good. Turkey meat, ground turkey. A friend had made some baked spaghetti for me for dinner. And after eating it, I could just feel like I was being sedated. I said, this does not feel good. So that was the last time I ate turkey meat. The same with chicken. When I ate chicken, I felt bloated. And I just felt, you know, if you feel like a clogged feeling, if you eat like pizza or something heavy, and you can feel the blockage, and I was like, this does not feel good. So that was it for me, and that was even before, I think by the time she was 2 or 3, and I didn't give her meat the first 3 or 4 years of her life either, and she didn't have fish until she was almost 4, and then chicken and beef came later when she was about 6 or 7, and most of that was halal. But yeah.
Is there a particular, like, is it a type of diet, or is there somebody that you follow, or stuff that you've read?
Some of the stuff I would like to say flexitarian. I'm more of a free spirit in that sort. I don't like to follow any rigid guidelines, because that can seem limiting and restrictive as well. And then it creates a little bit more stress depending on how far you go, right? And then because as a world traveler, you're not always going to be able to follow those guidelines. So
Right.
what I do follow and what everyone should follow is what's right for my body, what's right for my spirit. How do I feel when I'm eating this food? Do I feel energized? As we talked about, energy is never created or destroyed. Do I feel energized? Do I feel good? Or do I feel sluggish? And then what am I doing for that day? You know, I'm a Southern girl. You know, I don't eat fried chicken or anything anymore, but once in a blue moon, I might want to enjoy a really delicious mac and cheese. You know, not everybody's, but if it's one of my favorite, my family members' favorite signature dish, yeah, I might take a little square, right? Moderation, just for the nostalgia. And so, yeah, it's like what's right for me. And if I'm dancing, if I'm in a dance company, there are certain things I know I've got to stay away from, because if not, I'm going to feel it the next day. And not so good. I'm going to be drained. So that's the biggest thing is, you know, what is the function of this nourishment? What do I need? Do I need to be energized? Do I need to have sustained energy? Sweet potatoes are great for that. You know, am I going to be out all day where I may not have immediate access to nourishment and food? Even if I have it packed with me, maybe I have to pack very light. So I can't take the thing. So I'm going to make sure that morning I'll have, you know, a baked sweet potato and pour some almond milk over it with some cinnamon, because cinnamon, you know, balances your blood sugar as well. So just eating for intentionality or intentional eating.
Yeah, intentionally paying attention. I think that's a big,
Yes.
which you had mentioned. I hadn't thought of that whole lot before, but like I can't like. Well, several reasons I couldn't drink. One was my son. The other was my esophagus. You know, that acidity I just couldn't take anymore. And it was like, especially laying down.
Yeah.
Oh my God, after like you drink and you lay down and it just kind of settles, going, oh, it's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, it's alcohol.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
alcohol.
it's the reason they call it intoxication.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's just something that, I mean, there's a lot more studies now where, like, I think they said if it's more than like 2 drinks a week, you're drinking more than you should, or you're considered an alcoholic. I think, I'm not sure if it was the CDC who put that out, but yeah, that's pretty impactful. But yeah, listening to yourself, that's a big key.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, because like there are times where if I've eaten something, I can tell what it was. If I feel bad, I can tell pretty much what it was, because as you're eating, you know, you should be mindful. You know how we eat on the go or eat, then get up and go and do. You should be mindful when you're eating, because, you know, not only does it allow you to appreciate the meal, but it also allows your body to process the meal in such a way where that your body doesn't really go into shock. You know, a good walk is okay. And this is not medical advice by no means. This is, again, how I experience it in my body. Yes, consult your doctor by all means. But for me, it's important when I'm eating to be mindful of what I'm eating. Does it mean that I never eat on the go? No. But I always try to make sure, even if I have to pull over on the side of the road to appreciate that meal, that's what I will do. You know, a lot of my friends and family will joke about how slow I eat, but I said I am actually enjoying and appreciating this meal. And if you find, when you pay attention, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes for the brain to recognize that there's something in your stomach. You take your time to eat. That's a great way to cut back on portion control. You know, I mean, I've experienced you're eating so fast, you're hungry, and then before you know, oh my God, I overate.
Oh yeah.
You know, and that's not a good feeling.
And you feel like you're about to keel over.
Yeah.
Sluggish,
Absolutely.
very sluggish. You know. Yeah, that's in eating before you think that you're full. That's a big, because our bodies are designed that, you know, from like the caveman days, that you know, it's instinctive survival that you just keep consuming. I think maybe within the last like 50, 60 years, so like preservation of foods has really come into play, and so this overabundance thing, you know, has really kicked off, but we still have that instinctive ability to keep consuming, and advertisers know this too.
And even I mean, I think about when I've traveled to other countries, the meat portions. It's not to say it's not everywhere, but the meat portions are usually smaller. And a lot of times the meat is it accompanies the meal and not the main course. Like the vegetables, the size of vegetables or grains and legumes are typically just as large, if not larger, than the meat. And some would say, oh, that's because, they're economic. And it's like, no, not necessarily. It's because they understand that you don't need a lot of that. But also, they don't have all the health ailments, like cancer is not running rampant in their society like it is in ours. So, if we're supposed to be the majority or the prominent culture or society, and I say that very lightly, right, based on our previous conversations, if we're supposed to be, then why aren't we healthier? And there's a lot of factors that we talked about, but if you think about that, and it's like, and then they're more active, they're walking. When I lived in Brazil, I lost so much weight and I was so healthy, and that just fortified even more why I made the decisions around how I consumed food and how I ate. They have fried things and fried foods and sweets over there as well. But they also don't have, they have more ethical regulations in a lot of areas, and again, during that time, right, a lot has changed, so I can't speak for today, but I know when I was there, when I ate, I didn't feel sluggish. I still felt energized. Even if I ate a large plate, I still felt energized, and they were big on, having the way we have convenience stores in neighborhoods. When I was living in Brazil, there were a lot of like corner farmers markets, fresh fruits and vegetables, very accessible, pretty much anywhere. And no matter where you ate, you had a protein. You had beans and rice. That was a big staple in Brazil. And then you had at least 2 or 3 options of vegetables, green, leafy green, or beets. One of the favorite things I discovered when I was there was, a shredded beet and carrot salad with, I think it was feta cheese or goat cheese. And that was my favorite thing. So when I came back, I was making that all the time in the summer. Lots of benefits. You felt light and, got your iron and everything else. So it was really good. And that's what I loved about traveling as well, because the diversity of nourishment that you can get that you don't necessarily get in the American diet on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I think and you've been to, how far have you traveled? You went to Brazil, you mentioned. Have you been anywhere else?
Yes, so I've been to Acapulco 3 times. Well, I was going to say, let me just say overall the countries: Mexico, Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, China, Sweden, Switzerland, Germany. I think that's it. I feel like I'm missing something. Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Brazil. Yes, and then, like I said, China, Sweden, Switzerland, France, and Germany. Yeah.
And was this for business, or did you just travel just because you wanted to travel?
Both.
Both, okay.
Yes. So Mexico was the first country I traveled to upon graduating high school. I went there about 3 times, and then during college, I traveled to Brazil, and then I went to school in Brazil during college, and after college, I went to Germany and France, and then right after college, I went to Germany and France, and then when I got into corporate, because they knew I had studied abroad in Brazil, they had a headquarters in Brazil, in the exact same city I went to school in. So they said, you can go to Lyon, France, or you can go to Brazil, Curitiba or Paraná. And I said Paraná because I was like, yeah, they're going to, I'm going to be working there, and I get to go back and see friends. So it's like a home away from home. So I got to go back and work there for 3 months doing a short-term assignment abroad. And while I was there, I had to do a market analysis and feasibility study. So I was able to travel. I was leading workshops in those areas for analyzing some service parts and how they manage the service agreements for the heavy-duty trucks in that market. So I was leading workshops in Peru, Ecuador, Chile, and Colombia. In all of those countries, I made sure I went salsa dancing because I said, those were things I didn't get to do when I was a student. I wanted to make sure I went there to actually get good grades and not just party, because that was kind of the reputation that, sometimes American study or Western study abroad student had. Y'all just come here to party. And I'm like, no, I actually want to do opposite of the stereotype. So, and then too, I was a student that didn't have a lot of money, first generation college grad. So I was like, I didn't have the money to do that. Now I'm here and it's on the company's dime. And, but not only that, of course I went travel dancing on my personal salary, but they made it possible for me to do that because I was working on their behalf. So, so it's business and personal. China was also during that time. And Santa Fe, I went back to Mexico for a project I was working on for pricing and things in sales. So went to Santa Fe as well.
That's really cool. Tell me about why. I think you probably learned a lot going to all these different places, just beyond food.
Oh, absolutely.
Just interacting with different people from a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important that people should, travel and interact with different places and different cultures and different people they might not interact with?
We have enough time. No, I'm joking. In my experience, it's very important. One, as a person who loves to learn about people, and just loves learning. If you like to learn, your appetite for me, my appetite for learning is insatiable. So, and if you like to grow, it grows you in so many ways. And as a leader, a business person, as a human in general, you learn. If you really immerse yourself and be present, it changes you in ways that you wouldn't even imagine. Or I should say, develop you in ways that you wouldn't imagine. But it also allows you to adopt different perspectives and different ways to think. And that's very valuable because, one mindset is not going to solve every problem. And just even working with other people, I love learning how people think and culturally how people think, versus, the way we think here in this country, the way that they think in Latin America or Mexico, because Latin America is very diverse as well. The way that they think in Africa. I've not yet been, but that is definitely on the list. But just, my close friends that I interact with, the way that people think and how the different ways that they address particular aspects of society or their work and career. And I would say the biggest thing, my first international trip was, the screaming thing for me was, don't let work become your life. Don't live to work, work to live. And that was the main thing that I loved and appreciated when I went to Mexico, was that work was just a part of their day. It was not the center of their life. They would work, and then it was nothing to get with family and friends, as if you would on a Saturday or Sunday, to just get together and go walk to the beach and have what they call La Lunada, a midnight party. We're on the beach and we're having fun, singing, dancing, having great food, snacks and things, and just enjoying each other by the shore, And that, I made a promise to myself. I was 18 the first time I left the country, and I promised myself, I said, I will not center my life around work. That's another spiritual slow death. Every day you're living to get ready for work the next day. What kind of life is that? That's crazy. And then, unfortunately, that's how you're living for the weekend. Some people, we made it to Friday.
Oh,
and I'm like,
I
no.
hate the Monday, Friday talk.
It's like, we made it today. Because guess what? So many people didn't. This is so timely. My prom date was murdered this weekend.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So we made it today. Not we made it to Friday. We made it today. I saw that article on the a friend shared it. One of our friends we both went to high school with shared it. I saw it last night and I said, oh my gosh, to see his name at the end of that article was a gut punch. And I'm like, I just said a meditation for him and his family, and I also expressed gratitude, right? We made it today. Some people, and they'll say, how you doing, Jasmine? I'll say, I'm grateful. I'm doing great. Even if my day is not going so well, but I'll say I'm grateful because I got to see this day. Because again, somebody didn't. Plenty of people didn't. Whether you know them or not, they didn't. and we don't know if we will tomorrow,
Mm.
right?
Oof.
So it's that gratitude, traveling the world as well, you know, seeing what we have at our fingertips that a lot of people aren't exposed to. When I was in Brazil, I learned that a child at that time, at 10 years old, if they're not in school, they're considered part of the unemployment population. If you're 10 and you're not in school, you are unemployed. Imagine that.
Wow.
And seeing children who, to survive, were sleeping in front of store steps and, you know, wake up, you're sweeping and keeping the storefront clean to eat because you either don't know where your parents are, they can't take care of you, or they might have mental illness or trauma, you know, not sure if they're alive or experiencing addiction and alcoholism. You know, so it just motivated me, and it's a mental freedom that you really can't even put into words when you leave this country. When you travel the world, it's a mental freedom, you know. Yeah, it's a mental freedom that's really hard to put into words, that to me is very liberating. And I'm like, if they are doing this, right? And it's not to say that all other countries don't have access to resources, because there's a lot of things that I saw that were very advanced in other countries, and we over here thinking we're the leader in this, and it's like, nah. Uber was happening when I was there in 2008. They called it Taxis 99. Now, I can't say, you know, where it happened first, but I experienced the Uber or car sharing with an app in Brazil in 2008 before I ever knew what Uber was. And that could just be my own unique experience, but, you know, Airbnb. They called it couch surfing when I was in South America. A lot of people were doing it.
It means something different here.
Yeah, well, yeah, you know, and so, you know, they couch surfing, and Orchid was the Facebook in South America, and that was just one of the things that I, you know, that I think about. But, you know, for me, it was very liberating, energizing, activating, motivating. I'm like, okay, anytime I traveled, I always looked at what is it that we're taking for granted back home. What are some ideas? What are some inspirations that I can leverage when I get back home? One of the things I wanted to do, because in 2008, you know, the recession and things that happened, when I was there, I got comfortable with the bus system because I didn't like the bus system here. I knew it was not very efficient or effective, and the city I was in Curitiba, Paraná, was the benchmark for the bus transit system in the world. And they had shared that some officials from Miami and a few other large cities would go there to study, and then they said they didn't necessarily always study, you know, do work. It was, you know, Brazil. People come there to party and things. They said they came here to learn about our bus system and transit. It's very, very highly effective. And I said, well, when I get home, I'm going to try to ride the bus when I get back home. So, and because gas was so high, almost $5 a gallon, and I had a tiny car. But at the end of the day, I was like, okay, well, maybe I could try to use the bus system, because I saw the health benefits and how much I could use the bus system there with ease. And when I got back, I was quickly reminded, yeah, this is not going to work out like you thought it would. You know, 2 hours to get somewhere in a city that's nowhere near as large as what Curitiba was. But, you know, again, there was a lot of limitations. So I could have done that, but it wouldn't have been effective for the schedule I had. But that was, again, leveraging different ways to improve your life here based on your experiences abroad.
And I would say even extend that, you know, if you haven't been out, talk to other people that have been like you. Like David, our engineer, he's in Scotland right now. But he told me that, like I was in the subway in New York City, and he said there's other countries where it's like he said it is like night and day. You know what I mean? Like it's so much cleaner, so much faster, so much more efficient. You know, you don't have to be so mindful. Like I would say, if you go in a subway in New York City, you know where you're going, know your letters and your colors of where you're going, and just, you know, don't step on the yellow, don't step near the tracks, because oh my God, I can't tell you how many people in my family had told me, you know, oh, don't go to New York City, it's so dangerous. You don't. I was like, no, like you just be mindful of what's around you.
Absolutely.
There's a study done on, like, they studied like prisoners who like predators and stuff like that, and they said if you know, they picked out, you know, their victims, and they said it was the same type of victim every time, every one of them. You know, they weren't prompted or anything, and it was like, the person who was just kind of aloof, who wasn't paying attention to their surroundings. It was about the type of gait that they had, so the type of walk.
Yep.
Not too long, not too short. There was all these types of things that they studied. And just like being mindful, looking around you, because
Yes.
if you take out the element of surprise on an individual,
Yes.
that you are already, they cancel you out as a victim. But the other thing I was going to say was, was there at any point, because we have this, it's the news media that kind of does this to us,
Yes.
is like every other country is like totally unsafe, right? Because we never hear good news. You never hear good news about another country.
Right.
Okay.
Isn't that crazy?
You never hear good news about another country. Like, you just like, people were captured in Mexico. And it's like, well, don't go to Mexico, I'm like, I don't know. Because the reason I'm about to ask is because we
Okay.
had an individual on here. He plays banjo Earth, and he travels to different countries, and he meets with musicians, and he does a documentary about his travel there, and they create an album. He creates an album with some local musicians, and he's a very talented individual. But yeah, I said, did you ever feel like, how much planning did you do? Did you ever feel? He's like, no. He's like, I just, you just kind of get a gauge of the people that are around, and if they tell you not to go somewhere, you listen. Yeah, like you understand like the people, and most of the people aren't really that bad. And even I'll go even further. I was listening to the Jocko podcast, Jocko Willink. He had another SEAL on, or another Marine on, that he was talking to, and they talked about Iraq, and when they were there, when America was there in 2006. He said, like, what percentage of the population was dangerous? And he said, oh God, like 5% maybe you were looking for. He's like, everybody else there was awesome. Everybody, like most of the people, they were trying to take care of you, give you water or whatever, like American troops, like they were looking out for you sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyway, did you ever feel,
No,
I
it's
said, I give
okay.
that long monologue, I'm sorry for taking your
okay.
airtime.
You're good.
Did you ever feel unsafe, or was there any point in any of these countries when you had to look over your shoulder or whatever, you had second thought about doing something?
To be honest, no, not really. And 90% of my travel abroad, I'd probably even say higher than that, 90 to 95% of my travel abroad has been by myself.
Wow.
By myself, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. One, I like to reflect. So, I love people, I love traveling with people, but I love to live in my head, always thinking, always reflecting. How did I process this experience? What can I learn? What are the parallels in life, that I can glean from this? And then, but yeah, I'm a perfect example. So I went to Ecuador, right? While I was there doing my market analysis study. And so I'm in the hotel, and I'm reading about Guayaquil. That's the city I was in. And I was reading, I saw that one of the landmarks, because I try to visit, the things that city is famous for. And it was El Mal del Sol, because, Ecuador is at the equator, so it's called the Mall of the Sun. And so I'm looking and I'm reading about Ecuador and Guayaquil, and it says it's one of the most dangerous cities in Ecuador. And I'm like, okay. I said, and as you can imagine, I'm like, okay, Jasmine, how do you feel? How are you processing this? Knowing it's one of the most dangerous cities, are you going to be led by fear, or are you going to go adventure? Because you're already on the other side of the world. You're already at the equator, right? That's a big experience. That's a new experience. And then it's like, what happens if you stay? You miss out on opportunity. I don't like to live in regret. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. I said, I'm not dying with that. That's not a good feeling. So what happens if you go? So I said, just go. And that's what I did. I went to the Mall del Sol, had a great time, enjoyed it, got to walk around, ate some great food, and nothing happened. And I was just like, and I said, Jasmine, it is in daytime as well, right? But also what I learned, even from previous travels, is when you're walking, like you said, walk like you know where you're going. Don't wear anything flashy. Don't walk around with a big touristy camera, because that's also saying I don't know where I am, or I'm not local. Thankfully, because of my skin tone, I blended in with the locals. But just in general, I knew how to conduct and maneuver myself. And I feel like the world is my home. So wherever I go, I feel like I know where I'm going anyway, right?
The world is your home.
Yes.
I like that.
And so at the end of the day, like, I went to the Mall del Sol, and I went salsa. Remember I said when I was there for work, I went salsa dancing in every country. So I looked up a salsa club and I asked the people at the hotel, where's the local and best salsa club that's close by, right? I went. So this will give you a great idea of how that experience is, especially as a woman. So I went there. I got the taxi to go salsa dancing. And when the taxi said, what time you want me to pick you up? I said, can you pick me up at 1 o'clock? I knew the club closed in Latin America. Most of the clubs close later than they do here, but I knew they were going to close like 2:30, sometimes 3 or 4. But I said, can you pick me up at 1 o'clock? One, because I knew I was a woman traveling alone, and I wanted to get out before everybody else got out. So that way, God forbid, if someone was eyeing me, they wouldn't know that I came there alone.
You wanted like a group of people around about.
Yeah, you
in
know,
the area.
and I just wanted to make sure I was leaving before it was noticeable that, she's here by herself. So I said, can you pick me up at 1 o'clock? Now, culturally, I don't know if you've heard of this. You've heard of CP time? Okay, CP time is colored people time. And so it's something that's joked about in various communities. And then there's international, they don't call it international time, but like if you're in Brazil, they say come to a party at 3, you don't show up until 5. In Africa, it's about the same thing.
Okay.
Say 3, you don't come till 6 or 7. My best friend who's Nigerian, she was 3 to 4 hours. Her traditional wedding was at 3. She showed up at 5:30, 6 o'clock. Her American or Western wedding was the very next day. That was supposed to be at 2. She didn't show up till 3:30. She had a little bit less time because they were paid, they were charged for the chapel. But that just gives you a time frame of culturally how people perceive time. And so, and another friend from Gambia, her wedding, she told everybody 7 o'clock. I was part of the bridal party. We didn't arrive until midnight. Imagine that. So, long story short, in Ecuador, I said 1 o'clock. I knew that they, were very, very free and liberal on time and punctuality. Guess what time that guy got there?
What time?
4 o'clock in the morning.
Good Lord.
Yes. And I called multiple times, and one time he even sounded like he was asleep. So he said, I'm on my way. I'm on my way. And I'm like, okay, sir, I am a woman. I'm standing out here by myself. Now, thankfully, again, to show you how good people are around the world, the security guard, he could have been corrupt, right? Or anything. He stayed there with me the entire time. He could have potentially called somebody to come get me, whatever. But he wanted to practice his English with me. So he thought I was native because of my fluency in Spanish. He thought that I was, if I wasn't from his country, that I was from somewhere else in South America or potentially the Caribbean, other parts of the Caribbean. And so he asked, he's like, can I practice some English with you until the taxi gets here? And I said, yeah. And that's when he said, yeah, we got the reputation for being late a lot of times and we're not very punctual. I said, it's okay. I said, I understand. I said, I just wish, he would show up, and I'm still, just being mindful, but I didn't feel like I was really, really unsafe. And it was dark. We was still sitting outside the club, and I just kept thanking him so much for being courteous and generous enough to stay there with me, But the guy showed up at 4 a.m, and I was sitting there giving English lessons on the side of the salsa club.
Wow. Oh my God! I wish we can go on for at least another hour, because there was topics I didn't even touch on. We didn't touch on TEDx or any JCs or any of the other things. We didn't get into language as much as I wanted to, but that's okay. We got into so many other cool things. Well, anyway, this has been lovely. I just have one more thing.
Sure.
As Lieutenant Colombo would say. Have you ever thought about, you can get a program here on our channel for for the fee of $125 a year. You get 2 half-hour programs a week. And you too can do this. So, you could do it about anything, about language, about consulting, about leadership. All those things are intertwined with you, about traveling. Anyway, anything you want to do it on. But anyway, this has been amazing. This has been even better than I had ever thought it could be.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate you.
Oh yeah, no,
thank you.
As soon as I met you, I was like, I got to have you on the program. So.
Thank you so much. This has been a joy to experience.
A joy. Yeah, absolutely. The feeling is mutual. So, please, we'll have you back maybe.
Okay.
Talk about some of the other things. Again, thank you for being on the program.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you having me.